The conference room in Geneva fell silent as the holographic message played for the third time. The alien transmission was clear, spoken in perfect English, Mandarin, Spanish, and a dozen other Earth languages. The message was simple and terrifying. People of Earth, we are the Galactic Concordat. Your planet sits in a location of strategic importance. We require your solar system for our expansion. You have 60 days to evacuate. Any who remain will be considered hostile. This is your only warning. President Maria Santos of the United Earth Government sat at the head of the table, her face pale. Around her, military generals and world leaders argued in angry voices. Some wanted to fight. Others wanted to negotiate. A few suggested immediate evacuation. We cannot just surrender our home. General Zhang Wei slammed his fist on the table. Earth has 4 billion people. Where would they go? We must fight. The Secretary General shook his head slowly. Our best analysts have studied their ships. The technology is centuries beyond ours. Maybe more. We wouldn't last a week in open combat. They chose to fight anyway. Humanity had never been good at accepting defeat without trying. The world united as never before. Old enemies became allies. Nuclear arsenals were repurposed. Every ship that could carry weapons was armed. Every person who could fight was trained. When the Concordat fleet arrived on day 58, Earth was as ready as it could be. The battle was not glorious. It was slaughter. The alien ships appeared at the edge of the solar system. Dozens of massive vessels that dwarfed Earth's largest carriers. They moved with impossible speed and precision. Earth's defense fleet met them near Mars, hoping to keep the fighting away from home. The human ships opened fire first. Missiles and railgun rounds crossed the dark space between the fleets. Some hit their targets, scarring alien hulls with fire and shrapnel. For a moment, humanity dared to hope. Then the Concordat fired back. Beams of blue energy cut through human ships like knives through paper. Entire destroyers simply vanished, their atoms scattered across space. Human pilots screamed over the radio as their ships broke apart around them. Within 20 minutes, half the Earth fleet was destroyed. Captain James Morrison watched from the bridge of the ESS Defiance as 3 alien fighters chased down his sister ship. The carrier Valiant tried to run, her engines burning at full power. It didn't matter. A single energy beam struck her reactor. The ship exploded in a ball of white fire that briefly lit up the face of Mars. All ships, fall back to Earth. The command came from Admiral Richard Torres aboard the flagship Unity. We regroup at Luna, protect the homeworld. But there would be no regrouping. The alien fleet followed them home and surrounded Earth like wolves circling wounded prey. They did not land troops at first. They simply began firing on the cities below. New York died first. The alien beam struck Manhattan at noon on a Tuesday. 8 million people were going about their lives when the sky turned white. The beam burned down through the atmosphere, heating the air to plasma. When it struck the ground, everything within 20 miles turned to glass. The island of Manhattan became a smoking crater in seconds. Beijing fell next, then Mumbai, then São Paulo. The aliens methodically destroyed every major city on Earth. They targeted population centers with cold efficiency, military bases, government buildings, industrial zones. Anything that represented human civilization became a target. Millions died in the first hour. Hundreds of millions in the first day. People ran into the countryside, seeking shelter in mountains and forests. It didn't matter. The Concordat had weapons for that too. Bioweapons that made plants wither and die. Nanites that broke down concrete and steel into dust. In bunkers deep underground, what remained of Earth's government made the hardest decision in human history. We cannot win, Admiral Torres said, his voice hollow. The old man had aged 20 years in 2 days. We need to evacuate. Get as many people off-world as possible. Evacuate where? Someone asked. The moon, Mars? They'll just hunt us down. Then we go farther, Torres replied. To the outer system. To the colonies on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. We scatter into deep space if we must. Some of us will survive. Some of us have to survive. The evacuation was chaos. Every ship that could fly was pressed into service. Military transports, private yachts, cargo haulers, mining vessels, ancient colony ships that had been in mothballs for decades. They lifted off from a dying Earth, their hulls packed with desperate refugees. Sarah Chen was a commander in the Earth Space Navy, piloting a transport ship loaded with 3,000 civilians. She watched through her cockpit window as the planet she loved burned below. Smoke covered entire continents. The oceans themselves seemed to be on fire in places. She wanted to cry, but there was no time. Her hands moved over the controls, guiding her ship away from Earth gravity. Behind her, alien fighters patrolled the orbital space, shooting down any ship they deemed a military threat. They let the transports go. Why wouldn't they? Where could humans run that the Concordat couldn't follow? Sarah's last view of Earth was through the rear cameras as her ship jumped to faster-than-light travel. The planet was wrapped in clouds of brown and gray. Fires dotted the surface like dying stars. The moon hung nearby, silent and cold as always, a witness to humanity's end. 2 billion people died in the bombardment. Another billion died in the chaos that followed as Earth's ecosystem collapsed. Of the 4 billion who lived on Earth, only 800 million escaped. They scattered across dozens of ships, fleeing into the vast darkness of space. The Concordat claimed Earth 3 weeks later. They landed troops and began the process of removing the last traces of human civilization. Buildings were torn down, monuments destroyed. They even began changing the atmosphere to suit their own needs. Within a month, the Galactic Concordat declared Earth pacified. Humanity was listed as extinct or irrelevant in official records. The human problem had been solved with minimum effort and acceptable losses. The galaxy moved on. There were other species to manage, other systems to claim. Earth was just another world conquered, another primitive species removed from a valuable piece of real estate. But in the darkness between stars, on battered ships running on failing life support, humanity survived, and they remembered everything. The mining station on Ceres had been abandoned for 15 years before the human refugees found it. The airlocks were broken. The water recyclers barely worked. Radiation leaked through cracks in the hull, but it had air, and that made it a palace compared to drifting in space. Sarah Chen walked through the dark corridors with 24 other survivors. Their flashlights cut through the dusty air, revealing walls covered in ice and mold. This station had been built to house 500 workers. Now it would shelter 3,000 refugees from her transport ship. They would have to make it work. "We can fix the recyclers," said Marcus Webb, an engineer who had worked on Mars before the invasion. He ran his hand along a water pipe, ice crystals clinging to his glove. "Give me a week and I'll have clean water flowing. Food is the problem. We have maybe 2 months of rations." Sarah nodded slowly. This was the same story on every refugee ship, every makeshift shelter humanity clung to across the outer solar system. They were surviving, barely. Children cried from hunger. The old and sick died in the cold. There was no medicine, no replacement parts, no hope of rescue because there was no one left to rescue them. 3 months after Earth fell, the first human refugees encountered alien civilization beyond the Concordat. A battered colony ship limped into the Kepler station, a massive trading hub run by a species called the Frin. The station master looked at the humans with something between pity and disgust. "Refugees are not permitted. Long-term docking," the alien said through a translator. Its insect-like face showed no emotion. "You have 12 hours to resupply and leave. Payment is required for all services." "We don't have money," the human captain replied. "But we can work. We have engineers, doctors, scientists." The Vrin clicked its mandibles in what might have been laughter. "The Concordat has declared your species irrelevant. No station in civilized space will employ you. You are unwelcome here." That became the pattern. Humans were pariahs, ghosts of a conquered people. Some alien species pitied them. Most viewed them as pests or worse. A few tried to help but feared Concordat retaliation. Humanity learned that the galaxy was not kind to the defeated. But humans were adaptable. They always had been. Some became pirates, raiding Concordat supply ships in the outer systems. They operated from hidden asteroid bases, striking fast and disappearing before reinforcements arrived. The Concordat posted bounties on human pirates, but that only made the raids more daring. Others became miners working in conditions that killed most alien species. Humans could survive higher radiation, extreme temperatures, and crushing gravity better than most galactic races. What killed others merely made humans uncomfortable. They sold rare minerals for food and fuel, slowly building a network of trade. Children grew up in this harsh reality. They were born on cold ships, raised in asteroid tunnels, taught to repair equipment before they learned to read. They heard stories about Earth, about blue skies and green forests and cities full of light. But to them, these were fairy tales. Their reality was darkness, cold, and the constant struggle to survive. 6 months after the fall, Admiral Richard Torres sent out an encrypted message from his ship, the Unity. It bounced between hidden relay stations, reaching every scattered group of human refugees. This is Torres. We are not defeated. We are scattered but not broken. I am establishing a coordination network. We will call ourselves the Remnant. To any human receiving this, report your position, your resources, and your capabilities. We will survive. We will endure. And one day we will return home. The responses came slowly at first. A mining crew on Europa, a pirate band hiding in the Kuiper Belt, scientists holed up in an abandoned research station. Each group thought they were alone. Each group was struggling just to survive. But the network grew. Sarah Chen received the message on series. She read it 3 times, her hands shaking. Hope was a dangerous thing. It made you believe when belief seemed foolish, but she sent her reply anyway. This is Commander Sarah Chen, formerly Earth Space Navy. I have 3,000 civilians on Ceres Station. We have engineers and can repair ships. We're barely holding on, but we're ready to help. Torres promoted her on the spot. She became the coordinator for all refugee groups in the asteroid belt. It was a fancy title for a desperate job. She spent her days organizing supply runs, mediating disputes between refugee groups, and trying to keep people from giving up. At night, she looked at the old photographs on her tablet. Earth from orbit. Her family home in California. Her daughter's 8th birthday party. All gone now. Everyone in those pictures was dead. The pain of it never faded, but Sarah learned to use it. She turned grief into fuel. The Remnant began to organize. Former military officers trained civilians in combat. Scientists studied captured alien technology, trying to understand it. Engineers built hidden shipyards in the hollows of asteroids, using salvaged materials to construct small, fast ships. They also began to fight back in small ways. A Concordat fuel depot on Titan exploded mysteriously. The aliens blamed it on equipment failure, but human saboteurs had planted the charges. A Concordat patrol ship investigating the outer system disappeared without a trace. Its crew never knew that human pirates had been tracking them for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. These were pinpricks, barely noticed by the vast Concordat military. But they were proof that humanity still existed, still resisted. A year after Earth fell, a young woman named Maya Torres arrived at Ceres. She was Admiral Torres's daughter, just 17 years old. She had been born on Earth but barely remembered it. What she remembered was the evacuation, the screams, the fires. She remembered her mother dying in her arms when their transport ran out of oxygen. She remembered 3 days drifting in a broken escape pod before being rescued. I want to join the military, Maya told Sarah. I want to fight. Sarah looked at this thin, angry girl and saw herself. Saw all of humanity, really. Beaten down but refusing to stay down. Desperate but still dangerous. We're not ready to fight a war, Sarah said gently. Not yet. Then when? Maya demanded. When will we be ready? After we're all dead? After Earth has been alien territory for so long that no one remembers we existed? Sarah had no good answer. But she took Maya anyway, trained her, made her part of the Remnant. Because Maya was right. They couldn't just survive. They had to prepare. They had to become something the galaxy had never seen before. In the darkness between dead worlds, on ships held together with salvage and hope, humanity was changing. They were learning to be harder, colder, more ruthless. The species that had built art and music and philosophy was learning to build weapons and plan revenge. The Concordat thought the human problem was solved. They were wrong. They had not killed humanity. They had forged it into something new, something dangerous. And in secret bases across the outer solar system, the Remnant was preparing for the day when humanity would return home. 3 years after Earth fell, humanity discovered something the aliens had never expected. Humans were very, very good at killing. The Concordat had fought wars across the galaxy for thousands of years. They followed rules, protocols, and honorable combat traditions. They announced their intentions before attacking. They avoided civilian casualties. They treated prisoners according to ancient agreements between civilized species. Humans had no such limitations. Humans had watched their homeworld burn. They had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. They fought like cornered animals because that's exactly what they were. Lieutenant Marcus Chen led the first major human raid on a Concordate supply depot. The station orbited a frozen moon in an unimportant system. It was guarded by a single frigate and a dozen automated defense platforms. The Concordate considered it perfectly safe. Marcus had spent 6 months planning this attack. He studied the guard rotations, the supply schedules, the weak points in the station's shields. He gathered 3 salvaged human ships, each one cobbled together from a dozen different wrecks. They looked like junk, but they flew, and that was enough. "Remember the plan," Marcus told his pilots. "We hit fast. We hit hard. We take what we need and we're gone before reinforcements arrive. No heroes, we're not trying to win a glorious battle. We're stealing food so our children don't starve." They attacked at shift change when the guards were distracted. The human ships came in fast and low, using the moon's gravity to hide their approach. The defense platforms never saw them until it was too late. Marcus's ships fired crude missiles made from mining charges. They were primitive weapons, but they worked. 3 platforms exploded in balls of fire. The Concordate frigate scrambled to respond, but human ships were faster. They danced around the bigger vessel, too quick to target. One human pilot deliberately rammed a defense platform, destroying both his ship and the platform. The pilot survived in his emergency pod. His sacrifice created an opening. Human boarding teams breached the station wearing salvaged spacesuits held together with tape and prayer. They fought through the corridors with weapons they had made themselves. The Concordate guards were trained soldiers with advanced energy weapons. The humans had railguns, explosive charges, and 3 years of burning rage. The aliens never stood a chance in close combat. Humans could withstand accelerations that would kill most species. They could survive injuries that would be fatal to others. They fought with a savagery that shocked the civilized aliens. When a human soldier got shot, they kept fighting until they physically couldn't move. One human operative had her arm blown off by an energy weapon. She picked up her severed limb, threw it at her attacker as a distraction, and shot him while he was confused. The station fell in 40 minutes. The humans loaded their ships with food, medicine, fuel, and every piece of technology they could carry. Then they did something that terrified the Concordate more than the attack itself. They left survivors. But before leaving, Marcus delivered a message. "Tell your commanders that humans are not extinct. Tell them we remember Earth. Tell them we are coming for everything you took from us." The survivors reported the attack with shaking voices. The Concordate High Command reviewed the footage from station cameras and learned 2 important things. First, humans were far more dangerous than they had assumed. Second, there were far more human survivors than they had believed. Admiral Torres watched the news of the raid from his hidden headquarters on an asteroid called Hope's End. The base was built inside the rock itself, invisible to scanners. He smiled for the first time in years as he read the reports. "They're scared," said Commander Sarah Chen, now his second in command. She stood beside him in the control room they had built from salvaged parts. "The Concordate is finally taking us seriously." "Good," Torres replied. "Fear is a weapon. Now we expand operations. I want raids on 10 more targets in the next month. Keep them off balance. Make them worry about every remote outpost." But raiding supply depots was just the beginning. The real prize came 6 months later when human intelligence located a Concordate dreadnought, traveling alone through deep space. The ship was enormous, 3 times larger than anything humans had built. It carried a crew of 6,000 and enough firepower to level a planet. It was also arrogant. The Concordate never expected anyone to attack their warships. Why would they? No sane species would attack something so powerful. Humanity had lost the luxury of sanity. Sarah Chen led the attack personally. She commanded a fleet of 40 human ships, everything the remnant could spare. They were all small vessels, fast and maneuverable. Against a dreadnought, they should have been cannon fodder. "We only get one shot at this," Sarah told her pilots. "If we fail, we all die. But if we succeed, we change everything. Are you ready?" Every pilot responded the same way. For Earth, the human fleet hit the dreadnought like a swarm of angry insects. They came from every direction at once, overwhelming the ship's targeting systems. Energy beams cut through a dozen human ships in the first minute. The pilots died knowing they had drawn fire away from their companions. Human ships launched everything they had. Nuclear missiles, kinetic penetrators, boarding pods filled with soldiers ready to die. The dreadnought's shields absorbed most of it, but shields had to drop eventually to allow the ship to fire back. That's when the humans struck. Maya Torres, now 20 years old and one of the Remnant's best pilots, was in the first boarding pod to breach the hull. The pod hit the dreadnought's side like a bullet, its drill bit punching through armor. Maya and her team poured into the ship wearing combat suits they had built from 100 different pieces of scavenged equipment. The interior of the dreadnought was chaos. Alarms screamed. Emergency lights flashed. Concordat soldiers rushed to repel the boarders. But they were not prepared for what humans had become. Maya's team moved through the corridors like ghosts. They used the ship's own layout against its defenders, setting traps, creating ambushes. When they encountered resistance, they didn't try to fight fair. They used explosives to collapse corridors. They vented sections to space. They fought dirty because survival mattered more than honor. The battle for the dreadnought lasted 6 hours. It was brutal, bloody work. Half the human boarding teams died, but they kept pushing forward deck by deck, room by room. They showed no mercy because Earth had received none. Finally, Maya's team reached the bridge. The Concordat captain stood at his command station, trying to coordinate the defense. He looked at the human soldiers with something close to disbelief. These were supposed to be the primitives, the extinct species, yet here they were, covered in blood and burns, having torn through his ship like it was made of paper. "Surrender," Maya said in the Concordat language she had learned. Her gun never wavered from the captain's head. "Your ship is ours," the captain considered fighting. Then he looked at his dead crew scattered around the bridge and made the smart choice. He surrendered. News of the captured dreadnought spread through the remnant like fire. For the first time since Earth fell, humans had won a real victory. They had not just raided an outpost or stolen supplies. They had taken a capital ship, the pride of the Concordat fleet. Torres ordered the ship brought to a hidden facility in the Oort cloud. Human engineers swarmed over it like ants, studying every system, every weapon, every piece of technology. They learned how Concordat jump drives worked. They cracked the encryption on military communications. They studied the ship's logs and discovered strategic information about Concordat deployments. But most importantly, they learned that the Concordat was vulnerable. They're spread thin, Sarah explained to the Council of Remnant Leaders. They control hundreds of systems. They're fighting 3 other wars in distant sectors. They only left a garrison force on Earth because they think we're gone. Then we hit them, said Marcus Chen. We show them they were wrong. Not yet, Torres cautioned. We're stronger than we were, but we can't fight the entire Concordat. We need more ships, more weapons, more people trained to fight. How long? Someone asked. Torres looked at the holographic display showing their scattered forces, their hidden bases, their captured technology. He thought about the billions who died on Earth. He thought about the children growing up in cold asteroid tunnels. He thought about revenge and justice and the terrible price of both. 5 years, he said. Give me 5 years and I'll give you an army. We'll take back Earth or die trying. The room fell silent. 5 years seemed like forever, but it also seemed possible. For the first time since Earth fell, humanity had a real plan. They had hope. And hope, it turned out, was the most dangerous weapon of all. 8 years after Earth fell, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the battleship New York and watched her homeworld appear on the view screen. Earth was closer now, still 3 weeks away at full speed, but close enough to see. The planet that had been blue and green in her memories was now brown and gray. The aliens had changed it, made it theirs. They were about to change it back. All ships report ready, Admiral, said Commander Maya Torres from the weapons station. The young woman had grown into a formidable officer. Scars covered half her face from a boarding action 2 years ago. She wore them with pride. Sarah nodded slowly, looking at the tactical display. The remnant fleet had grown beyond anything she had imagined. They had 70 capital ships now, most of them captured or salvaged Concordat vessels. They had 300 smaller ships, fast attack craft built in secret shipyards across the outer system. And they had 20,000 trained soldiers, every one of them hungry for revenge. Send the message, Sarah ordered. Let them know we're coming. The message went out on all Concordat military channels. It was simple and direct, broadcast in every language the Concordat used. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Remnant Fleet. 8 years ago, you destroyed our world. You killed billions of our people. You thought we were extinct. You were wrong. We are humanity and we are coming home. Clear orbital space around Earth within 30 days or face the consequences. This is your only warning. The message included a timestamp and coordinates. Sarah wanted the Concordat to know exactly when and where humanity would attack. Let them prepare. Let them bring their best forces. It wouldn't matter. The Concordat response came within hours, a recorded message from a high commander, his face showing the contempt of a superior species addressing primitives. Your threats are meaningless. Earth is Concordat territory now. Any attempt to reclaim it will be met with total annihilation. You survived once through cowardice and flight. You will not survive again. Sarah played the message for her senior officers. She saw their faces harden, saw the rage burning in their eyes. Good. They would need that rage for what came next. He called us cowards, Marcus Chen said quietly. The veteran raider commanded a squadron of attack ships now. He doesn't understand. Running wasn't cowardice. It was patience. The human fleet moved toward Earth like a storm gathering strength. They stopped first at the asteroid belt, where hidden bases launched thousands of rocks toward the inner system. Each asteroid had been fitted with basic thrusters and guidance systems. They would arrive at Earth weeks before the fleet, creating chaos and forcing the Concordat to waste ammunition shooting down rocks. At Jupiter, the fleet picked up 3 more battleships and a swarm of fighter craft. The base on Ganymede had been building ships for 5 years, using materials mined from the other moons. Every vessel was designed around human advantages, speed, maneuverability, and the ability to take punishment that would kill other species. The first real battle happened at Mars. The Concordat had turned the red planet into a fortress, building orbital stations and filling space with automated weapons platforms. They had 3 capital ships and 100 support vessels protecting the approaches. They want to stop us here, Sarah observed. Make us fight for every inch of space between us and Earth. Then we don't give them that fight, said her tactical officer, a former mining engineer named Liu Wei. We go around. Around meant going through Mars's thin atmosphere, using the planet itself as cover. It was an insane maneuver. Ships were not meant to fly through atmospheres, especially at the speeds required to maintain combat velocity. The friction would tear hulls apart. The heat would cook crews alive. But humans had spent 8 years learning to do insane things and survive. The battleship Beijing led the atmospheric assault. Captain James Morrison, the same officer who had watched Earth burn from the Defiance 8 years ago, now commanded humanity's most powerful warship. He took his ship into Mars's upper atmosphere at speeds that made the hull glow red. Inside the ship, the crew endured forces that would have killed most alien species. The gravity compensation systems could only do so much. People blacked out at their stations. Blood vessels burst. Bones cracked under the pressure. But they held on. The Beijing emerged from Mars's atmosphere like a meteor, trailing fire and fury. It appeared in the middle of the Concordat formation, too close for their long-range weapons to track. The battleship opened fire at point-blank range, energy beams and railgun rounds tearing through alien ships before they could react. 12 human ships followed the Beijing through the atmosphere. 4 didn't make it, breaking apart from the stress or burning up like shooting stars. But 8 survived, and that was enough. The Concordat formation shattered in confusion as human ships appeared among them like wolves in a flock of sheep. The battle for Mars orbit lasted 6 hours. The Concordat fought well, but they were not prepared for human tactics. When a human ship was damaged, it rammed the nearest enemy. When a station's shields dropped, boarding teams struck immediately. Humans fought with a desperation their enemies couldn't match because for humans, this was personal. Every alien they killed was revenge for Earth. When the battle ended, Mars orbit belonged to humanity. The victory came at a cost. 20 human ships destroyed, 3,000 people dead. But the way to Earth was open. The Concordat finally understood what they faced. This was not the frightened species that had fled 8 years ago. This was something new, something terrifying. They called for reinforcements from other sectors, pulled ships from distant wars. They would make humanity pay for every mile of space. But reinforcements took time, and time was something the Concordat no longer had. The human fleet reached Earth's orbit on the promised day. They found a massive Concordat defense force waiting, 60 capital ships, 500 smaller vessels, enough firepower to reduce a moon to dust. The aliens thought numbers would overwhelm the human fleet. They were learning that humans didn't care about numbers. All ships, attack formation Gamma, Sarah ordered. Target their carriers first. Starfighter wings, you know what to do. The human fleet split into 3 groups, each one attacking from a different vector. It violated every principle of traditional space warfare. You were supposed to concentrate your forces, not divide them. But humans had rewritten the rules of war. Human fighters swarmed the Concordate carriers like angry bees. They were tiny compared to the massive ships, but they were fast and numerous. Each fighter carried a pilot who had grown up knowing nothing but war, who had been trained since childhood to kill aliens. They flew with a skill born of desperation and practiced in 100 small battles across the solar system. Maya Torres led her fighter squadron directly at the Concordate flagship. The alien dreadnought's point defense systems filled space with energy beams, but the human fighters wove through the fire like they were dancing. Half of Maya's squadron died in the approach. She didn't slow down. For Earth, she screamed over the radio, and her remaining fighters added their voices. For our dead. For our home. They struck the flagship's shield generator with everything they had. Missiles, railgun rounds. 2 fighters deliberately crashed into the generator at full speed, their pilots dying to create an opening. The shields flickered and failed. The battleship New York fired its main gun through the gap. The massive railgun round, moving at a fraction of light speed, punched through the flagship's hull like a spear. The ship didn't explode dramatically. It simply stopped working, its systems failing one by one as the projectile destroyed everything in its path. The Concordate formation began to break. The aliens were trained soldiers, but they were not ready for an enemy that fought like demons. Every human ship that was damaged became a guided missile, ramming the nearest target. Every boarding action turned into a bloodbath as humans fought with knives and bare hands when their guns ran empty. On the bridge of the New York, Sarah watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. The battle was far from over, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Concordate was losing, and they knew it. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Concordate commander," her communications officer reported. "He's asking to negotiate." Sarah thought about the billions who died when Earth fell. She thought about 8 years of suffering, of children growing up in cold darkness, of humanity clawing its way back from extinction. She thought about the alien commander who had called them cowards. "Tell him there will be time for negotiation after we clear Earth orbit," Sarah replied. "Right now we have work to do." The battle raged on and humanity pushed forward, unstoppable as a force of nature. They had come home, and nothing in the galaxy would stop them from staying. The battle for Earth orbit ended on the 3rd day. The Concordate fleet was not destroyed completely, but it was broken. Damaged ships limped away to the outer system. The rest surrendered when they realized they had no chance of victory. Sarah Chen watched from the New York's bridge as the last alien warship powered down its weapons. "We won," Maya Torres said quietly, as if she couldn't quite believe it. Around the bridge, the crew stood in stunned silence. They had prepared for this moment for 8 years, but now that it was here, it felt unreal. Sarah nodded slowly. "We won the battle. Now comes the hard part." Earth hung below them, so close and yet so changed. The continents were recognizable, but the colors were wrong. The oceans were a sickly green. The atmosphere had a brownish tint. Alien terraforming had begun to transform Earth into something else, something suited for Concordate biology. "Begin landing operations," Sarah ordered. "Military forces only for now. We need to secure the surface before we bring down civilians." The first landing craft touched down in what used to be North America. The continent was empty of the great cities that once stood there. New York was still a glass crater. Chicago had been torn down to its foundations. Los Angeles was buried under alien structures that looked like massive insect hives. But there were Concordate colonies now. The aliens had brought millions of their own people to live on humanity's world. They had farms and factories and cities built on the ruins of human civilization. Those colonists watched the human ships descend with growing fear. Captain Marcus Chen led the first ground assault on a Concordate military base outside what used to be Denver. His troops landed in drop pods, hitting the ground hard and moving fast. The base was defended by professional soldiers, well-armed and well-trained. It didn't matter. The humans had spent 8 years learning to fight in every condition imaginable. They had fought in the vacuum of space and the crushing gravity of gas giant moons. They had fought in ships and stations and asteroid tunnels. Earth gravity felt light to them now. The air felt rich. They moved like predators who had finally returned to their hunting ground. The base fell in 4 hours. Marcus stood in the command center, looking at the alien maps of Earth. They had divided the planet into sectors, labeled each region with concordant designations. There was no mention of human names. It was as if humanity had never existed. "Tear these down," Marcus ordered. "Bring me real maps. Human maps. I want to know where our cities were, where our people lived. This is Earth, and we're taking back every inch of it." But the conquest of Earth was not simple. The Concordat had 40 million colonists on the surface. They were civilians, families who had come to Earth thinking it was safe Concordat territory. Now they found themselves on the wrong side of a war they didn't start. Sarah faced this problem from orbit. The easy solution would be to treat the aliens the way they had treated humanity, destroy their colonies from space, wipe them out as they had tried to wipe out humans. It would be justice, but it would also make humanity into the monsters they had been fighting. "We're not them," Sarah told her senior officers during a heated meeting. "We didn't survive 8 years in hell just to become like the Concordat. The colonists are civilians. We will not target civilians. They're living in our cities," someone objected. "On our land, using our resources. Then we move them," Sarah replied firmly. "We relocate them to designated areas. We give them a choice. Leave Earth peacefully or stay as prisoners of war. But we do not slaughter them. That's an order." The evacuation of Concordat colonists took months. Most chose to leave, taking ships back to Concordat space. Others stayed, too old or sick to travel. Humans allowed them to remain in supervised zones, protected but watched. It was a strange mercy given to an enemy that had shown none, but Sarah insisted. "We survived because we're better than them," she said. "We proved that by acting better." Meanwhile, human refugees began returning to Earth. The ships came by the hundreds, carrying the survivors who had spent 8 years in the outer dark. They stepped off the transports onto soil that their parents and grandparents had walked. Many fell to their knees and cried. Others simply stood in silence, overwhelmed by the sight of open sky. Among the returnees was Admiral Richard Torres, now old and sick but still alive to see this day. Sarah met him at the landing site in Colorado. The old man moved slowly, leaning on a cane, but his eyes were clear. "We did it," he said simply. "We came home." "Yes, sir," Sarah replied. She helped him walk to a viewpoint overlooking a valley. In the distance, work crews were already beginning to tear down alien structures. "But there's still so much to rebuild." Torres nodded. "That will take generations. The Earth they left is gone. We have to build something new." He was right. The Earth that humanity returned to was scarred almost beyond recognition. The atmosphere needed to be restored. The oceans needed to be cleaned. Entire ecosystems had been destroyed and would need to be regrown from preserved genetic samples. It would take a century or more to undo the damage. But humans had learned patience. They had survived 8 years in the outer dark. They could survive a century of rebuilding. The Concordat tried to negotiate once they realized Earth was truly lost. A delegation arrived 3 months after the battle, led by a high-ranking official who spoke with barely concealed anger. "You have violated galactic law," the official declared. Earth was claimed under proper Concordat procedures. Your attack was illegal. Sarah met with them in a simple prefab building on the edge of the old Denver crater. She wore her uniform, but no medals, no decorations. She didn't need them. "You murdered 4 billion people," Sarah said calmly. "You destroyed our world and declared us extinct. We don't care about your laws. There will be consequences," the official warned. "The Concordat has thousands of ships. We were not prepared for your attack, but we can gather a fleet that will crush you." Sarah smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "Then come and try. But understand this. We are not the species you destroyed 8 years ago. We have your technology now. We have your weapons. We know how you think, how you fight. And we have nothing to lose because you already took everything from us." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to something cold and hard. "If you come back, we won't just defend Earth. We will hunt down every Concordat world in this sector. We will burn your colonies the way you burned ours. We will teach you what it means to fight an enemy that has no mercy left." The official left without another word. The Concordat had finally learned what humanity had become. They did not return with a fleet. 1 year after the liberation, humanity held a memorial service on the glass crater that used to be New York. 1 million people gathered there. Standing on the fused ground where the city once stood, they built a monument, a simple black wall with names carved into it. Billions of names. Every person who died when Earth fell. Sarah stood before the monument with Maya Torres beside her. The young woman had lost her mother in the evacuation, lost friends in 100 battles. She stared at the names with dry eyes. There were no tears left. Was it worth it? Maya asked quietly. 8 years of suffering. All those deaths. For a world that's not even the same as the one we lost. Sarah thought about the question. She thought about the children growing up in rebuilt cities, learning about the stars and the terrible price of survival. She thought about the fleet that still orbited Earth, ready to defend against any threat. She thought about humanity's new place in the galaxy. No longer primitives to be dismissed, but a power to be feared. It was worth it, Sarah said finally. Not because we got back what we lost. That's gone forever. But because we proved that humans don't break. We bend, we adapt, we survive. The Concordat thought we would disappear into history. Instead, we came back stronger. She looked up at the sky where Earth's moon hung bright and clear. Beyond it, invisible in the daylight, were the stars humanity had fled to and then returned from. The galaxy was vast and often cruel, but humanity had earned its place there. They thought Earth would fall, Sarah continued. They thought we would fade away, just another extinct species. But we're still here. We survived. We endured. We returned. Maya nodded slowly. What happens now? Now, Sarah smiled. Now we rebuild. We make Earth beautiful again. We raise our children and tell them the stories of how we survived. And we make sure that no one, ever again, underestimates humanity. Around them, the crowd began to sing. It was an old song, something from before the fall. The words were about hope and home and the strength to carry on. The voices rose together. 1 million people united in memory and determination. Ambassadors from other alien species attended the ceremony, including some who had helped humans during the dark years and others who had turned them away. They all heard the song. They all saw the monument. They all understood the message. Humanity had returned, Earth stood free, and the galaxy would never forget what happened when you tried to destroy the humans. The species that built cities and art and music had learned to build weapons and fleets. The species that valued peace had learned to wage war. But most importantly, the species that the Concordat called primitive and irrelevant had proven that humanity's greatest strength was not technology or weapons. It was the simple, stubborn refusal to die. Years later, young humans would look up at the stars and ask their parents about the dark times. They would hear stories of the exodus, of the 8 years in the cold, of the desperate battles to reclaim their home, and they would understand that Earth was not just their birthright. It was something their parents and grandparents fought and died to reclaim. The monument in New York became a place of pilgrimage. People came from all over Earth and from the colonies in the outer system. They came to remember. They came to honor the dead. They came to remind themselves of the price of survival and the cost of freedom. And carved at the base of the monument, visible to anyone who visited, were words that became humanity's new creed. They thought Earth would fall. They thought we would disappear. They were wrong. We are humanity. We endure. We survive. We remember. And we never, ever give up. The galaxy learned that lesson well. Earth stood as a warning and a promise. Touch humanity's home again and face a vengeance that would never stop, never falter, never forgive. Humanity had returned, and they were home to stay.